Alright guys, welcome back. Harry here, known as Tradesharpe. In today's video, we're going to talk about supply and demand versus support and resistance in price action. Now, I truly believe that both of them use price action, but when should you use supply and demand? When should you use support and resistance? Now, this is not a diss video. This is simply a video that I want to discuss the differences, because some people say support and resistance, supply and demand, same thing. Some people say there's nowhere the same thing. Well, in reality, for me, they are both price action concepts. They both have similarities. They have a lot of differences, and they are used in specific times and specific ways to trade, and there are a few advantages, disadvantages to both. So that's why I want to discuss it, to give people a clear overview and to understand there's not only one way to trade these markets. Let's have a deeper understanding, because if we can understand something, we can use that to our advantage, apply it in the markets and get better. So I wanted to cover this topic. People have been asking me to do so I thought I'm going to make a video about it and explain to you basically supply and demand versus support and resistance, who wins, who doesn't win, all of that good stuff. So with that being said, let's get straight into the video. Now, before we start, as always guys, if you're new to the channel, can we please do the YouTube business? If you don't know what the YouTube business is, it's simply leaving a like. And if you enjoy the content and you find some gems on my channel, which I'm sure, hopefully, because I put a lot of effort into the content, you will, then consider leaving a subscribe, join the club. And down below is my Instagram link in the description. Also the link to my free group that you can get access to access all of my documents, etc. And that's what we call the YouTube business. So with that being said, let's get straight into the chart and discuss about this. So guys, gonna talk about supply and demand, give you a brief overview of supply and demand and support and resistance. This video is designed for people who heard both of the concepts or know both of the concepts and are not sure which one to use on when to use it. This is going to clarify everything, make it super clear as to when you should be using support and resistance, when you should be using in supply and demand, and which one should you use based on what makes most sense to you, and why maybe you should choose one over the other. I think both are great tools. I'm biased to one, that's because that's the path I've chosen, but I do know a lot of profitable traders using both. So I respect all of that. Just want to give my opinion and just, tell the difference between both here, because I do think both can be very, very useful, and I'm actually experimenting with one of them. So with that being said, let's get straight into the video. All right, guys. So when it comes to support and resistance and supply and demand, we have to understand what is the difference. So supply and demand is basically support and resistance. Now, as much as people don't want to believe it, that is exactly what it is. You have supply zones and demand zones. So supply zone would basically be a resistance and a demand zone would be a support. And essentially in supply and demand, you expect price to react from the supply or react from the demand. Whereas support and resistance is very much the same. You have basically a support, which is going to be defined more accurately because you'll be using exact candle body closes instead of a zone, right? And you have a resistance, which is going to be defined again more accurately because you have price basically creating a resistance and you're marking it based on bodies, not a zone. So if we were to look at an example, let's say this was a supply zone and this was a demand zone. A demand zone, you would take something like this, right? Let's say you would just draw it something like this. And a supply zone, you would draw something like this, okay? Whereas a support and resistance, we become very accurate and we would go even, tighter like this, and we'd say this is your resistance, right? And then this is your support down here, right? That's how it would look, right? It would be super accurate. Down here, this would be our support. This would be our resistance right here. And we would look and we would mark it by the candles closing, right? So if a bearish candle followed by a bullish candle makes a support, a bullish candle followed by a bearish candle makes a resistance, and we would just be super accurate, right? That's the difference between support and resistance and supply and demand. So which is better? Now, if we understand that literally this is just a support, but as a demand, it becomes a zone, that's the difference. Now, I have used both, and the number one thing why I stuck to support and resistance is accuracy, right? Because you can be certain that something is a resistance and certain something that is a support based on what you see on the chart. Now, the one thing that I will tell you is that it's very much the same. If you're not following bias, if you do not know how to analyze higher time frames, if you do not know how to work your way down to the time frames, you're going to mess up using both strategies. No matter which one you use, again, supply and demand, support and resistance, it's very much the same thing. Now, the only difference is when it comes to actually entering trades, and this is where I started to go more towards support and resistance instead of supply and demand, is because when we trade based on supply and demand, many people, well, there's many other ways to trade supply and demand, but the most popular is that you're looking from reactions from these zones, right? So you're looking for price to come to the zone, and as soon as it taps into that zone, you take, when maybe you see a rejection or something like that, you take a buy or you take a sell based on that. Whereas support and resistance, we're not looking, I don't have to have price come back to my zone. I can trade what's directly in front of me. I just need a setup to form. And both instances both have rules that you have to wait for before you can execute on the trade. But with support and resistance, I have pure confirmation. So say today I've identified price is bullish and I'm looking for buys. If I'm looking for buys and my next resistance, let's say I find a resistance up here, I'm not going to scroll back because I'm on GJ, and the last time it was up here was 2015, so I'd have to scroll back for ages. But make an example, last resistance was here, that's why we reacted on it. If I go ahead and look at this and I say this is my resistance here, if let's say a supply and demand trader saw a breakout out of here, they'd be looking for a pullback into basically a demand zone to continue bullish. Whereas a support and resistance is why I leant more towards it, is like, okay, this is what's in front of me. We have a resistance here, and if I can have the confirmation of a candle closing above resistance, that is where I'm going to be able to take my trade. So as soon as this candle closes above resistance, or even this one that's nice and bullish, or even the 30, right? You can see that is my confirmation to enter a trade towards the upside. And this is why I preferred it, because not only does it give me an accurate stop, because my stop loss will be on confirmed structure, not just a zone. I'm not putting my stop loss below a zone, I'm putting my stop loss at confirmed structure. It gives me confirmation that price is leaving a resistance or leaving a support, and then I can use targets on support and resistance, which are extremely accurate because you're targeting previous zones. Exactly like how this was a support down here, this gives you this type of resistance and avoids you from holding a 9-10 pip pullback here, which of course you can lose profit. Same thing here, right? If you didn't use accurate, if you're using a zone, you can see here accurate, it avoids you using what? 9-10, it avoids you losing potentially on 16 pip profit here, which at the time of the trade, although it pushed through and looks very simple right now, at the time of the trade, it's not as easy as it looks here, because 16 pips, losing 16 pips of your trade is obviously not ideal. So when it comes to which one should you use, you have to understand the differences and understand that, listen, for me personally, I think support and resistance, no matter if you use supply and demand, or support and resistance, I still feel you need support and resistance, because even when you enter a trade based on a supply or based on a demand, you do need to be able to target relevant support and resistance to have accurate take profits, in my opinion. And that is why I lent more towards it. So for me, when I'm thinking about scalability, I'm thinking about, okay, what gives me more confidence? What can I build more rules? What I have more setups and more formations? And for me, allowing myself to not trade from a range, reaction-based trading, but instead of confirmation-based trading. And that's the difference that was made, is that I was able to trade based on confirmations instead of reactions, and I can trade from zone to zone. So if we just draw support and resistance, we are building ranges. All inside of here is ranges, right? This is a range, this is a range, and I can think of the market to trade between those ranges based on my support and resistance. And that's why I personally chose support and resistance. Now, I have nothing against supply and demand, but for any, this video is mainly aimed for people who are confused between the two. Which one should you use? Should you be using supply and demand? Should you be using support and resistance? It's to clear it up and to make sure you guys understand what's the difference. Test both, and whichever one you feel is best for you will give you the opportunity to use it, of course. So, a good way to test, right, is exactly why. So how I tested, how I did my thing is I had a backtesting software, and I ran, different types of scenarios, make sure my setup works. Of course, on my channel, I mainly cover price action and my, support and resistance strategy, which I have all my setups, which you can find on my channel. But the number one thing that you want to do, no matter if you use supply and demand, support and resistance, test that out, practice, use a backtesting software. And that's exactly how I did it, and I wanted to bring one. So I've actually made a backtesting software with my team, and you guys are lucky. So all the guys who are currently subscribed, as you already know, we do have V2 coming out, and this is a sneak peek of V2 here. So we did partner with TradingView charts, so you will have candles on TradingView charts. But go ahead and use this to your advantage here, right? So we'll let this load up and I'll show you. So you guys have a sneak peek here of Pip Labs. So this is Pip Labs, my backtesting software. Now, many people like, what's the difference between the rewind tool on TradingView? This is the first ever web-based backtesting software that you don't skip candles here. You play the candles like live candles here, right? So you can see if you just press the play button up here, it will play the candles like live candles, exactly how they were moving in the market. And you can place orders whatsoever, new order like this. It will calculate your risk for you. There's a lot of features coming, but I'm not going to spoil it. You guys know V2 is coming. If you're interested to be able to be on the launch offer of this, you can join the waitlist. So yeah, you can join the waitlist, drop your email, and you'll get the launch offer. But enough shilling of this. The reason I want to show is this is a great software to explain something, and we can go and see how support and resistance zones work here. So if we can identify on a 15-minute time frame that we have different zones here, we know that this is a resistance zone here. So trying to buy right at this zone, probably not going to be a good idea, right? So we can be accurate like this. But at the same time, selling at this zone is not going to be a good idea, because if we look at bias, what the candles have done, like let's look at previous daily is bullish here, previous 4-hour time frame is also bullish here. We have two bullish, we have everything saying that price is bullish, and this is my session bias. This is what I use to trade, which is session bias. So essentially session bias is essentially what gives me what direction I should be looking for. So if you're using supply and demand and can identify this as a supply and you're looking to sell here, it's probably not the best idea when everything is pointing up. So for me, I'd be using this. Okay, this is an area. Let me start skipping candles here to show you, right? I would say this is an area that I'm not probably going to sell at like this, because we pushed through. But this is going to give me an opportunity that if price can close above, it probably makes more sense for buys because it's clearing this area, right? And that's what I mean, where people can get confused with supply and demand, because it's like, hey, you need to still consider trend, bias, and everything. So for me, price, makes sense to continue up today here. And if we look what ends up happening, we do get back above this zone. But obviously, what do we have here? All types of resistances, right? All types of resistances that price is rejecting off, which is why it never continued up here. But now, right, again, since we expect upside continuation, you can see the reaction from that resistance here, right here. That's the resistance we reacted from. This is a clean area here. There should be no issues here. And I can say, okay, anything getting above this resistance, I can trade to here very, very easily. Now, if nothing closes and it just pushes through, that's not my plan. But if something was to close above, that'll give me an opportunity to take a trade. So that didn't close above, this next one didn't close, and you see how this resistance is being held here, but still people might be looking for sells, but I'm still bullish. I'm using this as an opportunity, as confirmation to get in for buys as soon as something closes above. So as soon as something closes above, that's my confirmation here for buys as soon as something breaks that high. And you know what, we could actually just pop a trade on that, just to prove this concept. Yeah, obviously this is not the best risk to reward type trade here, but minimum target here would be this resistance here. But let's just extend and we can use it as a watch. But yeah, let's just go see what ends up happening. We'll skip by 1 minute. See if we get triggered here as it breaks the high. Okay, so now we would be entered into the trade here. We can play this a little bit faster speed. Right, and I know minimum I should have the chance to get up to this next resistance minimum, because that's where my next area is. So there we go, it's getting up towards that resistance. Now that resistance, make it accurate here, almost tapped. So I expected to tap it, and I can use that to trade zone to zone, and that's my confirmation. So that's the resistance tap there, obviously now running into nice profits, and we push through it. But my point is that candle closing above this, where we have a clean candle here, that gives me the confirmation that I can push towards the next zone here. And that's how your trade can kind of work, right? So we'll just close that trade up there. And that's my point. And that's why I prefer using bias, using support and resistance to be accurate. Now, I can't tell you what happens here, if it pushes through or not. That's a wait and see. If this candle does not close above here, it's not going to continue up. That's your next target. If this candle continues, you're going to the next resistance. That's how it works. If bias is bullish, you're going to go to the next resistance. And we can see, look, candle doesn't close above. You see, it ends up rejecting it. Why? Look at it's the exact same spot. So it's beautiful how this stuff plays out. And yeah, that's basically a little bit about the support and resistance. I hope that this video has been useful and you found it a good video. And yeah, that's basically it. Let me know in the comments if you found it useful. And good luck with your backtesting. Good luck with choosing it. And I hope this clarified support and resistance and give you more clarity, and maybe help you make a decision of what you should be looking at. Supply and demand, support and resistance. Choose the one that makes most sense to you. And yeah, with that being said, take care, trade sharp, and hopefully catch you guys very, very soon. Peace.